From rags to riches to ratting out your friends, the American dream really is possible, and you won't believe what happens next. Okay, they say this one is based on a true story, so can you guys pretend to be serious here today? Make sure you don't laugh while watching this. This is someone's life. We start with these three dudes in a car. They pull over when they hear a sound from the trunk. They have a half-living guy in there, so they go and make sure he's gone. Then we zoom in on the guy who closes the trunk. He says he has always wanted to be a gangster. With those blue eyes? Dude, you were made to be a heartthrob and steal our girlfriends with just a wink. Why choose this life? Also, his name is Henry Hill. That's the name of a movie star. You see Vito Corleone? Yeah, gangster. Henry Hill? Hollywood star. Or Marvel superhero. But this guy doesn't care what he looks like or what his name sounds like. He says for him, being a gangster was better than being POTUS. Crazy, right? But then he grew up in Brooklyn in 1955, so you can understand. He saw these mafia guys live the life, and he so wanted to be a part of it. Tuddy and Polly were his role models, and he got an after-school job working for them. His Irish dad and Italian mom loved that he got a job. His dad loved that he wasn't lazy like American kids, and his mom loved that the Ciceros were from the same part of Sicily she's from. But Henry loved the job because it instantly made him famous. He could go anywhere and do anything. He was parking Cadillacs for the biggest guys on the block, and the other kids just got to watch him be cool. But soon his parents stopped loving the job. This is only supposed to be a part-time job, but Henry's treating it like a full-time job now. He loved that he was treated like a grown-up. He felt like he belonged. He was living in a fantasy. His dad, however, was an angry bird. But then he's broke. There are 7 of them living in this tiny house, and one of his kids is in a wheelchair. Oh, and did I say that he's broke? I'd be angry all the time too, honestly. Okay, but not this angry, because why is he hitting Henry like that? With his hand, with a belt, and with that much anger in his face. And this wasn't a one-time thing. The major source of his anger became the fact that Henry had abandoned school and wouldn't quit his job. So he would beat Henry every now and then. Henry now goes to tell his boss that he can't make any more deliveries because his dad says he'll clap him if one more mail about him missing school gets delivered to the house. So what does Polly do? He abducts the mailman and threatens him not to ever deliver mail from Henry's school to his house. I can't lie. Gangsters have interesting ways of resolving issues. Anyway, the letters stop coming. All of them. Now we see Henry hopping all around holding an umbrella for Polly. Polly hates telephones, so he used to get his call secondhand and then call back from an outside phone. And that's what Henry is doing for him right now. Polly also hates conferences, so if there was an issue, he talked to all the concerned parties one-on-one, like he's doing right now. One thing you should know is Polly is the OG here. Hundreds of guys in the community depend on him, and he gets a cut from all of them in exchange for protection from guys trying to rip them off. He and his organization basically offer protection to guys who can't go to the cops. Now we see Henry setting some cars ablaze while telling us that, at 13, he was making more money than most of the grown-ups in the neighborhood. He was also getting mad respect, and probably hella thotties too. Fast forward to the first day Henry sees anyone shot. At this time, he's still a compassionate kid, so he rushes to get help, but Polly reprimands him for wasting aprons on the guy and says he has to toughen up. Tuddy later tells Henry that the reason Polly reprimanded him is because he doesn't want anyone dying in his building. Anyway, things kept booming for Polly and his people. They were all over the place. But then someone decides to start a war with Polly, and that's when Henry first meets Jimmy the Gent Conway. Jimmy was just in his late 20s, but he was already a legend. Everybody loved him. He was such a generous fella. Polly introduces him to Henry and he puts 20 bucks in his pocket just for that. But while he was loved, Jimmy was also feared. Like Henry, he started really young. He was first locked up when he was 11, and at 16, he was doing hits for mob bosses. Jimmy's hobby was stealing. Like, that was his pastime. He's such an OG that he has the police in his pocket. Anyway, Henry starts working with Jimmy, who introduces him to Tommy, a guy about the same age as Henry, and they become friends and start going on operations together. This one time, while Henry's out on the field, the cops come and get him and immediately take him to court. Tommy runs to go tell Polly, and Jimmy shows up swiftly to get him out of there. Henry thinks he'd be mad, but Jimmy's actually proud. He says everybody gets picked up, but he's proud of him for not spilling anything to the cops. He says Henry learned 2 important lessons today: to never rat out your friends and to always keep your mouth shut. Honestly, these are great lessons, even for non-gangsters. They step out of the court and the entire crew is out there. They're clapping and congratulating Henry for popping his cherry. Oh my goodness, it's an actual party out here. If I ever get picked up, even if it's just for jaywalking, I'm getting disowned. I already know it. Anyway, fast forward to 1963, we find ourselves at Idlewild Airport. Henry is a grown man now, and he's the one running things on these streets with the help of Tommy. The business now was to try and steal the $30 billion a year in cargo moving through the airport, and boy was it booming. Whenever they needed money, they just go rob the airport. This crew, essentially led by Henry, Jimmy, and Tommy, was running things. Really running things. Life is good for them. They spend most of the nights at this restaurant run by Tommy, and it's always lit when they're around. And you can easily tell which of them is the life of the party. But while they're having all the fun, they're also racking some debts. The manager, Sonny, dares to come to them about what they owe, and Tommy smashes his head with a bottle, while Henry and the rest of the guys are laughing their hearts out. Sonny immediately goes to report to Polly, who says he can't actually do anything. He has talked to the guys over and over, but they don't listen to him anymore. Sonny now tells Polly to come and be a partner at the restaurant, so he can have quick solutions to his problems. After much reluctance, Polly agrees. But the thing is, if you want Polly's help, then you always have to come up with Polly's money one way or another, whether business is going well or not. Well, business gets so bad that they can no longer afford Polly's money, so they set the place ablaze. Charge it to the game, I guess. That same night, Tommy asks Henry to come with him for a tag team match. Tommy goes just to be a good fella, but he's really not interested in anything going on here. He has some business to attend to. Karen, the lady he's supposed to be engaging, is really pissed. She finds him obnoxious. It was a bad double date for her, but Tommy and his girl Diane force her to come out again on Friday. This time around though, Henry doesn't show. She's crying right there on the table, but she picks herself up and tells Tommy to take him to exactly where Henry is. She shows up and confronts him right there in front of his boys. You could tell that was exactly when Henry fell in love. I too would fall in love, honestly. I mean, damn, look at her go. Henry then makes it up to her by taking her on a proper date, and he even meets her mother this time. They're Jewish, and she lied to her mother that Henry's also. He goes along with it. A few dates later, they head over to this nightclub named Copacabana, and she begins to sense that Henry is a big shot. First, he doesn't wait in line. Then everybody is hailing him, and even though the place is full, the waiters immediately create a table for him. Oh, and he picked up Jimmy's habit of handing $20 to virtually everybody in his way. Seeing all of this, Karen asks Henry what he does. He says he's in construction. She doesn't believe that for a second. Next, we see Henry and Tommy go and acquire $420,000 in the smoothest way possible. They give Polly a share and boom, Henry is back going on dates with his girl. Wait a minute, he's just 21? Oh lord, what am I doing with my life? Now we see Jimmy and Henry confronting this guy who owes Jimmy some money. Jimmy nearly sucks the life out of him right there, and not in the fun way. But Henry gets a distress call from Karen and he immediately leaves to go meet her. She's complaining about a guy who lives across from her who harassed her and assaulted her. Henry takes her home and immediately goes to do some panel beating on the lad's face with a pistol. After he does that, he goes to give Karen the pistol to hide, and guess what? She's into it. Crazy, right? Instead of her running far away from this apparent life of crime unfolding before her, what does she do? She marries him. Woman moment. And on the day of her wedding, Polly introduces her to the men in his family, all of whom go by Peter or Paul, and were all married to Maria's. Really crazy dynamic. The kisses and gifts she received that day were insane though. But then for some reason, Karen is still staying with her parents, and her mom is giving her hell because Henry hasn't called or visited. Karen defends her husband and it turns into a fight. Later that evening, Henry comes home, but Karen's mom yells at him right from the door, so he just turns, gets back in the car and leaves. Fast forward to a party, Mickey's party, where Karen is looking and feeling very out of place with all these women. Not only is she feeling out of place, she is feeling disgusted, and that's all she's talking to Henry about when she gets back home. Her fear now is that that might be her if Henry ever goes to jail, but Henry tells her he'll never go to jail. The only people who go to jail are those who don't have things organized, but he does. Well, 5 months later, nah, I'm joking. He doesn't go to jail, at least not yet. Anyway, it's straight back to the gangster life, which involves stealing trucks and getting a visit from the police. But the cops were actually not looking to take him in. They were only looking for handouts, you know, to keep their mouth shut. Anyway, you see those women Karen felt disgusted by the other time? Well, she's had to get used to them because they keep hanging out and doing things together. They're so involved in each other's lives. Anyway, moving on, Henry just keeps doing normal Henry things, racking up the cash and spoiling his women with it. You know, just like me, except without the woman and without the cash. Now fast forward to the 11th of June, 1970 in Queens, New York. Jimmy, Henry, and the rest of the guys are having a drink at Henry's bar when Tommy and his woman join them. This guy, Billy, who just recently got released from jail, is teasing Tommy, and it's a little too much for Tommy to take, so he confronts him, and that nearly leads to a fight. Henry immediately gets in the middle of it, and Tommy just leaves. But if you think that was to be the end, then you don't really know Tommy. He came back later and repeatedly plastered his fist on Billy's face with the help of Jimmy before then making him swallow bullets. Rip in peace. The three men now wrap him up and put him in the car. Their first stop is Tommy's old lady's house for some dinner, and of course, like every mother in the world, she tells Tommy to get himself a wife and settle down, but Tommy's not interested in any of that. Atta boy. Mama's a great host though. Apart from the food, she shares jokes and shows the boys her painting. The man in the painting seems to remind them of Billy. Speaking of Billy, he's now in the trunk of their car as they drive, and now we finally get to where we started. Billy in the trunk making some noise, and the boys stopping the car to make sure they have no zombie apocalypse on their hand. They now dig a little bed beneath the ground and tuck Billy away for his eternal rest. But here's the thing, this whole Billy business was actually a problem because Tommy just clapped a guy who was considered untouchable. He was a made man, and he was part of the Gambino crime family. Now for those of you who are not sophisticated in the mafia lingo, being a made man simply means he was a fully initiated member of the mafia. So yeah, definitely untouchable. But they touched him, and not like how my camp counselor touched me. This means trouble. For now though, things are still great. For these guys, Saturday nights are for the wives, but you see Friday nights, the girlfriends have those. And today's Friday, so you already know what the vibe is. But tomorrow's back to the families, and Polly's asking Henry what happened with Billy. Henry acts like he doesn't even know what he's talking about, so Polly tells him to keep his eyes open. Later at the bar, Jimmy tells Henry that they have to relocate Billy because that site is slated for development. So they head there immediately and start digging again. Henry is too bougie for all this. You can see how he's struggling. Bro, I told you, you should be a movie star, not a gangster. Anyway, the following day, he has to give his car a proper wash after all the things that he's seen the past few days. Moving on, Henry got an apartment for his girlfriend, Janice, around the corner, so he's able to stay over a couple days a week. Karen stays home with the kids and doesn't ask questions. Janice is having the time of her life being Henry's baby girl. She was slacking in work, and what does Henry do? He goes to torture her boss, telling him Janice can do whatever she wants. Must be nice. I might need someone to rough up my boss a little, but then again, I'm unemployed. But there's something of concern now. Tommy is now out of control. He's with the rest of the guys playing cards, and all of a sudden, he shoots the errand boy, Spider, in the foot. It was literally all fun and jokes until the pistol came out, but it's not even a big deal to Henry or the rest of the guys. You know what's a big deal to Henry though? The fact that Karen is now finding a problem with him not being home these days. She throws his car keys downstairs and he throws a lamp at her, but thank God for her reflexes. Crazy thing is that their daughter watched all of that play out, but Henry doesn't care. He's He's back out with the guys having the time of his life. Oh, now that's not a good fella. That's a deadbeat fella. Anyway, while they're playing cards, Tommy starts picking on Spider again, but this time around, Spider doesn't just take it lying down. Using the F word, he tells Tommy to go engage in some good old self-gratification. Jimmy and the guys hear that and are having a really good laugh and teasing Tommy. Then boom, from nowhere, Tommy brings out a shotgun and empties the case on Spider's body. Everybody's furious. He really brought a gun to a rap battle. Anyway, we quickly cut to Karen going absolutely crazy in front of Janice's apartment. She's there with her kids calling Janice a no word and telling her to leave her husband alone. You think that's crazy? Check out the next scene. She wakes Henry up with the Glock pointed at his face, asking him if he loves Janice. But you know Henry's a smooth talking fella, so he manages to de-escalate the entire situation with his riz. But the moment he gets her to lower her weapon, he hits her, overpowers her, and holds her at gunpoint before leaving her there on the floor. Now Polly has to step in. He and Jimmy come to talk to Henry at Janice's apartment. Apparently Karen came to meet Polly, so he's now telling Henry to straighten things out with his wife. They tell him he can do whatever he wants, but he has to go back to his wife. But before he does, he has a small matter to take care of with Jimmy in Tampa, Florida 2 days later. They're roughing this guy up trying to get money from him. They even threaten to feed him to lions. Crazy, right? But what's crazier is that when they get home, they were all over the news. Apparently that guy that was nearly dinner for lions has a sister who works as a typist for the FBI. So she sang like a canary, or like Bobby Shmurda, whichever you prefer. She got all of them picked up, and that's including her own brother. Jimmy and Henry were found guilty in 6 hours, and they were quickly given 10 years each. Remember when this dude said only people who don't have things organized go to jail? Well, how's that working for you now, Henry? Anyway, before they take their trip to jail, they make a little toast, and Henry pops some pills in the car. Now to life in jail, and it's actually calm for these guys. I mean, they're in prison, but they're actually living better than me. They have their separate accommodation, and they get all they want delivered, including substances. But that's Henry's thing alone. And guess who his plug is? Of course, it's Karen. But this one time she brings some stuff, she checks the register and she sees that Janice had come to visit him earlier. Mad at Henry, she starts yelling at him in front of everybody, while also throwing the food at him. Anyway, 4 years later, Henry's out on parole, and guess who's there to pick him up? Of course, it's Karen. The moment he gets home, he tells Karen to pack up. They're moving out. But right now, he's having lunch with the family. Polly takes him out to tell him not to continue his business outside prison, and also to look out for Jimmy and Tommy. But does Henry listen? No. He brings the business with him outside prison. He starts using Sandy's place to mix the powder, and it was instantly profitable. I'm talking 12K in just his second week profitable. Wondering who Sandy is? One of his girls. Come on, keep up. Anyway, Henry believes that, provided he keeps getting his supply from Pittsburgh. Polly would never find out. Oh, come on, dude. You should know better. But for now, though, he keeps blowing up, and he needs to involve Tommy and Jimmy. Meanwhile, Henry would use anybody as an employee. He even uses child's babysitter. Anyway, the guys now plan a heist, the biggest in American history. Jimmy put together the team. These guys you're looking at right now. And the job was to raid a vault at the JFK International Airport, and they were successful. $6 million. They pulled it off. Henry hears the good news on the radio while in the shower, and he's overjoyed. Next thing is celebrations, of course. But one of the crew went ahead to buy a car, and Jimmy couldn't believe it. What part of lay low did this dude not understand? Don't buy anything and you went ahead to buy a fancy car? This next dude went on to get his wife a fancy coat. Jimmy is headed up to here with these guys. Henry, though, decided to spend his own share on a Christmas tree, and he gave Karen a bundle. But as they're now finding out, the heist was not flawless. Apparently one of the guys slipped. He went and got stoned, went to his girlfriend's, and forgot to get rid of their getaway truck. It was all over the TV, and apparently, the cops even found prints on the vehicle. Because of that, Jimmy asked for the entire crew to be wiped out one by one. Of course, except Tommy and Henry. Henry comes to meet Tommy and Jimmy looking pretty confused, but they encourage him and tell him all is well. They even have some good news. Tommy's going to be a made man soon. But this dude right here, Mari, has still got his share from the heist. He has come to ask Jimmy for it, but Henry calms him down and tells him he'll get it. At this point, Jimmy's ready to clap Mari and tells Henry he'll need his help. Henry's planning to talk him out of it, but on the day it was supposed to go down, Jimmy calls it off. At least that's what he tells Henry. I guess because he knows Henry's a soft boy. He instead takes Tommy out to the car and he does the job for him. Jimmy takes out Maury and a few other guys from the crew in a bid to de-link himself with the heist. Bodies abandoned in a car, bodies disposed of in a waste truck, a body in a meat truck, just bodies everywhere. And well, it worked. Talks about the heist began to die down and money from Pittsburgh was still flowing in. So Jimmy was a happy man. On this very day though, Jimmy's happiness peaked. It was the day Tommy was being made. Jimmy was so happy for him. And of course, Tommy himself was happy. He hugged his mom and he went out to receive the highest honor possible. And he was the only one who could be made among them three. Because he's the only one who's 100% Italian. For you to be made, you have to be 100% Italian so they can trace all your relatives back to the old country. Kinda racist. But then Tommy getting made pretty much meant they were all being made. One of them is a made man. They're Gucci. But the only very tiny problem now is that Tommy was actually not being taken to get made. He was being taken to get clapped. He clapped a made man. No way they're going to make him a made man. Jimmy is told the news over the phone and he's taking it out on the payphone and everything around him. He's a wreck. And what makes the situation worse is that there's nothing they can do about it. Anyway, fast forward to the 11th of May, 1980, at 6:55 a.m. to be exact. Henry eats some salt through his nose, packs his Gloxies to deliver to Jimmy, and goes to his car. He's so paranoid now. He thinks a chopper is following him. Anyway, Jimmy doesn't want the Glocks, so Henry has to take them back. By 8:05 a.m., he's back on the road. He'll just take the firearms to his Pittsburgh guys. No biggie. But he nearly didn't even make it to his next stop as his paranoia nearly landed him in a car crash. But he survived that, and by 8:45, he's at the hospital to pick up his brother, Michael. His doctor sees him and wants him checked immediately. Henry protests, but he eventually gives in. The doctor checks him, gives him medication, and sends him on his way. The plan is to drop Michael off and pick Karen up. nap, but by 11:30 he's in the kitchen cooking. After some time, he and Karen now get to business, and she too can see the chopper following them. They go and drop the Glocks off and head back out. By 12:30, Henry's on a payphone with someone who tells him he's paranoid, and by 1:30, he is still paranoid. Finally, at 3:30, he gets to his Pittsburgh guys and does the drop-off, as well as the pickup. He's making calls trying to set up a deal. The babysitter will be taking it with her on a flight. Anyway, by 6:30, he's back home cooking again. By 8:30, he's at Sandy's place mixing and eating some salt through his nose. He then takes what he needs and leaves. By 10:45, he's back home in time for dinner. More like the Last Supper. It'll soon be time for the flight, and his babysitter comes to tell him she needs to go home and get her lucky hat. He's nearly losing his mind, but she insists she can't leave without that hat, so he takes her to go get it. But he doesn't even make it out of his garage. Cops surround him. Karen hears the noise and immediately goes to flush the salt down the toilet and hide the Glock in her crotch. Must be pretty big in there. Anyway, as it appears, the chopper was actually following Henry all day. It wasn't just being paranoid. They were narcs. They take him and the babysitter in, and Sandy joins them. He's busted, but it's Karen to the rescue yet again. She gets her mom to put her house up for his bail, and he's out. He gets home to find out that Karen flushed $60K worth of salt down the toilet, and he's mad. Nah, scratch that. He's seething. They're now officially bankrupt. Henry then goes to Polly to come clean and apologize. He tells Polly he has nowhere else to go, and he needs his help. Polly hands him some money, $3,200 to be exact, and officially cuts ties with him. Henry tells Karen they have to run or they'd be toast. She says he's only paranoid because of the salt he's been taking. She doesn't want to run. Instead, she goes to meet Jimmy for help. He hands her some money and directs her to some place. The place looks really suspicious, so she bolts. She gets home and breaks down in the car. Henry comes out to get her and takes her into the house. Later, Henry meets with Jimmy at a diner, and Jimmy gives him a little assignment in Florida. For the first time ever, Jimmy is asking him to go whack somebody. He's sending him with someone else. Henry figures that if he goes, he's not coming back alive. This realization makes him make the decision to abandon the advice Jimmy gave him back then and be a rat. He goes to the feds, offers himself, and gets enrolled into the witness protection program. With his testimony, they pick up Polly and Jimmy, and they get thrown behind bars. Now, being a rat wasn't even the hardest part for Henry. It was leaving the gangster life behind. And to show us how much he's hurt by this, he breaks the fourth wall to tell us, so we can see the pain in his eyes. Now he has a very boring life as an average nobody, leaving the rest of his life as a schnook. He loved that gangster life so much, but as it appears, Henry wasn't willing to die on that hill. Get it? Anyway, remember this is all based on a true life story. So yeah, in 1987, Henry got arrested in Seattle for narcotics conspiracy and received 5 years probation. 2 years later, he and Karen finally separate. That was long overdue. Polly fell to respiratory illness while in prison at the age of 73. Jimmy got slapped with a 20 to life for murder and was going to be eligible for parole in 2004, but cancer got him first in 96. Moral of the story? He was just a businessman doing business things.